Hello, everyone. My name is Prashanth. I'm a partner with Kalaari. Today, I have the privilege of bringing together a lot of senior execs from the corporate world, both from the investing side and also from the business side. So I'll first invite on the stage Navneet Kapoor from Target. Navneet runs Target India and also is responsible for the Target Accelerator. And over the years, they're probably one of the more mature accelerator programs in India. And they've, I think, over the years, worked with close to 22 startups that have graduated through the accelerator program, including making some investments. So the next one I'll bring on stage would be Alok Bardia from Cisco Investments. So Alok runs Cisco Investments in India and Asia Pac, and he has been with Cisco for a long time. And again, like with Target, they've been in the ecosystem for a while. And over the years, they've made about 12 investments, including people like MobiQuick back in the day. And they're, of course, focused on more tech-oriented investments. The next one on stage would be Dr. Vijay Chandru from Strand Life Sciences. And Dr. Vijay, as you know, is one of those guys who's done a lot of deep R&D and innovation in the genomic space. And he's also active in the ecosystem. I'll next invite Surojit Chatterjee from Flipkart. Surojit and I go back a long way. We were batchmates at KGP in '97. He was a long-time Googler and came to India about a year and a half back to run Flipkart's product and consumer. So he's the chief product officer at Flipkart. And as part of Flipkart, of course, they make investments and also work with the startups quite closely. I'll also invite Avnish from Accenture. Avnish runs the Open Innovation Program with Accenture, which is their platform to collaborate with the ecosystem, both for innovation and also for access to global clients. And lastly, I'll call upon stage Ankur, who's the co-founder and CEO from AdWyze. And he's the sole voice on this panel to sort of fight with the corporates and bring in the other perspective. So great, so thanks so much. We'll kick off the conversation with a bit of, I think the context here is not so much to debate on the opportunity. All of us would agree that working with corporates in a lot of different situations is actually a big opportunity for startups. The focus for this panel is more around how to make it work. How do you make it a win-win collaboration? Whether it's working with corporates as clients, or whether it's working with them as channel partners and go-to-market partners, or approaching them for investments and hopefully over time getting acquired as well, right? So there are different situations within which I'm sure a lot of you have dealt with corporates. We want to tease out a little bit of the nuances on how do you make it work? What do you focus on? Where is the value? And what are the best practices in really working with corporates? Maybe to kick off the conversation, I'll ask Navneet for you to talk about your journey in India with Target and what you've seen, both the positives and we talk about a few examples on success stories.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so I think this is an interesting topic. There's no debate, as we just heard, about the need for corporates and startups to work together. I think that's well established. The value is definitely being seen on the corporate side and hopefully on the startup side as well. But there may be some doubts there about the intent of the corporates and whether corporates are truly set up to support startups or not. But on the whole, I would say that value proposition is getting stronger on both sides of the equation. And yet, I would say it's not easy for startups and corporates to work together, right? They're not designed similarly by, corporates have different mandates. There's, steady quarter-over-quarter growth and profitability is their primary agenda, and that makes them less risk-taking, that, changes the processes within decision-making is very different. Whereas by startups, by their very nature, have to be a lot more agile. They have to be disruptive. They, they need to move very, very differently and react to the changes around them. So the marriage is not an easy one, and hence, from our experience, and I think this may be true for many others as well, it requires deliberate change on behalf of both the parties. So for corporates, I think this is a fundamental DNA shift that needs to happen in regards to figuring out how to work with startups. Just doing lip service around it or opening a corporate accelerator, as many companies have done, isn't going to make the cut. That's going to die very quickly if you don't have the other changes associated with that, and the biggest change is a cultural change within the company. The ability, like I said, to work with new ideas, incorporate them, provide faster decision making, simplify the bureaucracy in the processes within, and hopefully help the corporates, help the startups test their ideas in production within the corporate world. So that's really been our journey. We've been very, very focused on that over the last 3.5, 4 years. We are a highly curated program, which means we're bringing startups that have been selected very prudently to accelerate targets on growth agenda. So we have a very clear intent and motive. It's a selfish one. We want to accelerate our own journey, but in the process, hopefully become the first client for the startups we work with. So that's our stated goal, that within a period of four months, we help the startups test their product within a Target store or within our target.com website or within our marketing organization. And that commitment is a very important one. To get that going is not easy, as I said earlier, and we can talk more about that as we go along.
Sure. Thanks, Navneet. So maybe I'll bring upon Surojit. If you can talk about your experience recently with Flipkart, but also Google and what you've seen in the Valley.
Sure. Let me talk about Google first, probably, and I think Ankur here can add to that. So in the Valley, particularly companies like Google, supports the entire startup ecosystem very, very actively. It's not just lip service, like Navneet was saying. It's also not just supporting companies that will help your revenues in future. Sometimes just creating a startup ecosystem for the sake of it, and something good will come out in the future. So I've seen a lot of that. I'll talk about, and Google, so Ankur can talk about how Google has supported his company. Flipkart, I would say, in many ways tries to do the same, right? Our founders, as you may know, they are very active angel investors on their own. And this is apart from Flipkart, just personal investing. A lot of our management, senior management, also does angel investing. I do some of my own as well, both in the Valley and here. As a company, I think we kind of bring in that mindset. And some of it is for us to do kind of put long-term bets. So we put investments, sometimes pretty substantial stake in companies, like we have stakes in MapMyIndia, BlackBuck, Zapper, a bunch of companies that we have put stakes in, where we think these are strategically important for Flipkart to be associated with. In many cases, we may put investments to learn something in that area, even though it may not be directly correlated to what we are doing today. I would say, apart from investments, other big ways we work with startups is just partnership, pure commercial deals. And we are actually big champions of that. I have always seen working with the startup, things move way faster. And there are a lot of essential, whether services inside a company as the company grows, whether it's HR services, accounting, etc. Also, a lot of things in an e-commerce, particularly context. We have worked with crowdsourcing platforms and other startups on our returns side, returns logistics, etc., which has been very, very good for us, right? So we are very active supporters. We try to move as fast as possible. And of course, lastly, we have made some of the best, probably, startup acquisitions with Myntra and recently Jabong and few others as well. So I can talk more, but I'll probably pass it on.
So maybe Alok, if you can go next in terms of a slightly larger corporate than a Flipkart, right? With the multinational angle and global business.
Sure. So in terms of Cisco overall and our association with the startup ecosystem, it's a fairly robust and mature way of working. I mean, and I was just mentioning this to my fellow panelists earlier. It's a lot to do with the Valley DNA. So, in terms of us working with startups, when I look at US, there is no specific program around it. It's very natural. So if you're a business unit, a product head, or a salesperson working with a startup, and you could split it into two parts, a go-to-market side and a product side, it's fairly natural as a company for us as Cisco. I think where I'll take a slightly different view is when you think of the India ecosystem. Now, we are more of a core tech player. So I would say that the kind of startups we see in India are more around either consumer or if it's enterprise, more around applications. Now, that's not really the layer we play in, which means that when we look at startups here, the ecosystem we find is a little more early. So the way we're looking at it, again, I mean, I'll agree with all what the others said, that there's a lot of potential in India. We are active on the investment side. We've also launched an accelerator program, Launchpad, Cisco Launchpad here. And we didn't steal the word from Google Launchpad. I think it's a common term that's been used. So I think we're trying to sort of look at the ecosystem in a broader way. And I think for us, when we look at startups, we can look both at a go-to-market partnership side as well as a product integration kind of a play. The one comment I'll make here, and we can go deeper into it later, is while corporates is as Navneet was saying, it's a mature engine. It's an engine that runs their different functions. It's also important for the startup to understand what that animal is. What are the drivers of that company? And we can talk more about it. I think that's critical because if as a startup you're able to totally understand where are the priorities for that large corporate and see whether you bring value to that, the overall relationship will be much more smoother.
Sure. So I'll come back to that theme in a bit. So I think maybe going to Dr. Vijay, your perspective on slightly more deeper R&D kind of space with genomics, right? What value do you see from collaborating with others outside versus doing it in-house? And maybe Ankur, you can talk about your experience in pitching to startups after that.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I'm sort of in an awkward position here because I'm really not a corporate. I don't represent the corporate side. Nor do I represent a startup. But I think, as some of you know, I'm a professor turned entrepreneur. So for the last 15 years, there's been a hardware startup based on the computer that we worked on, and then it's been Strand Life Sciences, and I think I particularly have now a fair amount of experience in the life sciences biotech area, and the whole startup culture and the timelines involved in life sciences and healthcare make the startup culture there particularly difficult in some ways, but also requires deep R&D and scientific input, and I think the corporates in the biotech field are just few and far between in that sense. So partnerships tend to be also with a lot of international and multinational corporates, and so
how do you grab their attention? I mean, to Alok's point, right?
Right. So I think you grab their attention primarily with the quality of innovation and science. I think unless you have that quality, build relationships with the large multinationals.
Okay, so Ankur, maybe if you can briefly touch upon your experience as a startup, in pitching to corporates and selling to them.
Sure. First, I think what I wanted to mention is that different phases of a startup, you need different kind of support from corporate. Like especially when you are early on, you are sort of building your product. And this is apart from money. Trust me, I think money is probably the least important thing out of all the other factors. Like we were fortunate to be part of Google Launchpad program, and we got a lot of mentorship in terms of UX help, especially like we were desperately in need of UX. We had specially applied for the UX track, and we were fortunate to get that. So that helped us shape our product, helped us bring our product to a level where where our customers found it palatable. And then as you sort of, so those are sort of the initial days when you are sort of still shaping up your product, but later on then it moves on to like our product, it's in the enterprise sale thing. So enterprise sales, the sales cycles are much longer, and it's harder. And to be honest, I haven't done I'm not the sales guy. My other co-founder does all the sales, and I keep yelling at him like, why is it taking so much time? And the reason is like the corporate, I mean, like sales cycles are much bigger. So and to be honest, like we were not born with like knowing how to sell the product, right? So that is also somewhere where corporates can help us, like sort of selling our product. And there is also some misconceptions, like, to be honest, like the kind of customers we have worked with, they themselves are sort of startups or semi-startups.
Yep.
We haven't worked with corporates because of that sort of somewhere in the subconscious mind, that feeling is still there that like it will take a much longer time to even sort of get them going.
So let me come back to you on that. I think that's the crux of the next theme that I want to touch upon. So Avnish, maybe you can talk about, given Accenture as such a large global platform, whether you approach startups for innovation or whether you approach them for, let's say, or startups approach you with an innovative idea, or just as a GTM partner and a client access partner, right? How do you see that equation working out? You know?
Yeah, so I think Accenture Ventures and Open Innovation is a pretty established program now in India and globally. And just to give you a little bit of context, you know, there are issues for the corporates and startups to work together, as Navneet was talking about earlier. But we have seen reasonable success. So, you know, I'm just going to focus on the positive side of it because we see this as a very, very healthy relationship. Just to give you some context, we have around 45 engagements running with some of the leading B2B startups and our top clients in India, right? So the biggest steel manufacturer in India, the biggest automotive manufacturer in India, the biggest public sector bank. We are working with all these entities with some of the most leading and innovative startups. So I think when Accenture, if you talk about what we bring to the table, the number one thing which we do for startups is market access, right? And by doing that, we are doing no favor to them. Accenture needs innovation as much as the startups need clients. And Accenture or any other organization cannot innovate on their own with the kind of change which is going on. So I think it's a win-win situation for the startup, Accenture, and Accenture clients. So Accenture clients get the best of startups and Accenture. The startups get access to a big client, let's say a big bank, which they would not have been able to do if Accenture was not with them. And Accenture gets the first right of refusal from the startup. So it's a pretty comfortable and a very nice win-win situation which we have built for our clients and for the startups. So that's the first. Second is Accenture has about 150,000 people just in India. That means we have massive operations in terms of technology and BPO through which we are serving our global clients. Every day, about 10 global clients visit our delivery centers. So bringing these startups in front of them and pitching them, making them pitch to some of these big corporates, gives access to the Indian startups to our global clients, right? And that's a unique thing which Accenture, again, brings to the table. We are also using the startups for each and every function which Accenture does, right? So whether it is route optimization for our shuttles, which go and ferry our employees to and fro, or whether it is energy management for our facilities, or onboarding and pre-boarding of our employees, each and every part of our business, even which is not core, we are giving access to startups. So I am famously called in Accenture as the chief disruptor, right? Because for each thing which Accenture brings its own solution, I question them and say, why can't we use a startup solution in lieu of what we are proposing? Because it could be better and obviously cheaper, right? So these are some of the things which we are doing, and I think we have had reasonable success working with the startups. The only thing is that we are very focused on some of the areas which are aligned to Accenture's own growth. So the areas where we work with startups are mostly what we call digital and new IT. Digital would include things like IoT, blockchain.
So Avnish, maybe I'll come back to the themes that each of you are more interested in.
Yeah.
But building on your first point where you said, look, a lot of startups get access to your clients or get access to Accenture as a client. In cases where startups have earned that right, what worked well? And in cases where they don't get that right, to meet your clients, what goes wrong? And maybe others can pitch in,
Yeah,
Just
I
open
think
pitch.
what works right is that there needs to be ownership. I think from the client side as well as a commitment from the startup side as well. These are long sales cycles, and we are trying to solve some very complex issues for our clients, right? So you need a little bit of sustaining power to go through this rigor, right? And just to give you an example, right? So if one of our big consumer goods client came to us and said that rather than selling water purifiers, we want to sell water as a service. Now, this is a complete change of a business model, what they are trying to do. So yes, while there will be an IoT platform which will help you do that, there is also a significant change for the client in terms of their go-to-market model and a business model as well. So these are complex issues, and I think startup needs to understand that they need to go all the way if they want to be successful. And that is why when we choose startups, we generally work only with growth stage startups. So we are not at the moment working with early stage startups, primarily because of this reason, that we want startups which have a sustaining power to go all the way.
But is there a fair bit of co-creation, or are they mostly ready for what needs to go to the client? I mean, maybe others can jump in here.
I think, when there is a product out there that solves an immediate problem within a company, and I'll give you an example. There's a company called Discover Dollar. It's a one-person startup that's helping. It's an analytical tool that helps with vendor income collection, and for retailers and many other companies as well. That's a large problem, because a lot of the contracts that happen with vendors across the world aren't documented well, and there's significant vendor income leakage. And this one-person startup helps us solve that, and the impact is in tens of millions of dollars. And in that case, the alignment is fairly simple. The traction is fairly simple. I think the challenge is when the idea is interesting but isn't aligned to an immediate tactical problem that you have to solve.
Right.
And that's where I think the things that need to come together and work are multidimensional. And one of the biggest ones, which Avnish also alluded to, is sponsorship within the corporate, and especially where the business is. So, for example, in Target's case, we don't have stores or e-commerce in India, but all our business is in the US. So if you're going to work with startups in India, we better make sure that there's very strong sponsorship and ownership in the US for India-based startups. So one of the things we do is assign a business sponsor for every startup we bring on board. And then it's that person's agenda to get the product tested within a period of 4 months. And that's absolutely critical, because for large companies, there are hundreds of ideas at any given time that they're exposed to. So prioritization is a huge challenge. Even if ideas are good, they don't see the light of the day because they kind of don't make the final cut. So sponsorship is absolutely critical. And I think from a startup perspective, the ability, as Avnish was saying, to hang in there, to be flexible, to understand scale, to understand issues, for example, like information security, which may not be as important for a very small startup. For a large company, it's absolutely critical that that's solved first before the idea can even be tested in stage. So all of those start becoming very real, and companies that are flexible, startups that are flexible and are willing to navigate that and respond quickly, have a much higher chance of success there.
Sure. Surojit?
I'll just add to, I think flexibility and scale, very, very important, right? In fact, sometimes I have seen startups will have hang-ups in the sense that, no, this is exactly what we do. We won't do anything else. I mean, that's fine. But for many startups, getting the first few clients is very important, right? And often reaching to the corporates is how you figure out the right product market fit. Maybe what you are thinking as your product is not really how you will need to go to market with that product. You have to make some changes. I'll also, with flexibility and scale, I'll add one more thing, is kind of openness. Openness to discuss a lot about what you have built. A lot of startups I have seen, there is a little bit of hesitancy that, oh, if I tell you too much, you'll just copy it. Right? For a lot of corporates, actually, it's very hard to copy what startups are doing, to be very honest. If they could move as fast, they could have already copied it. Right?
We can call Flipkart a corporate in that sense?
What is that?
We can call Flipkart a corporate?
Well, we are, I won't say we are fully a corporate, but we are a very scaled company at this point, right? And what happens in a scaled company is what Navneet was saying, prioritization, right? We have to solve some of the very big problems. So some of the problems that are kind of sub-problems to that big problem, we are fine if somebody else solves it for us, rather than us solving them alone. So being a little bit open and talking about your technology, it actually does not hurt you. In fact, anything you can think of, somebody has think of already. It's mostly about execution. Because the corporate guy actually knows about the problem, just doesn't have the resources to prioritize. It may seem strange that corporate doesn't have resources, but it's true, actually. Because they're probably solving some of the much larger problems and do not have resources to solve every single sub-problem. I'll give one example. For example, we bought a company a few years back called Jeeves. Yep. And it gave us this capability to provide installation service when we deliver a large screen TV or something to the customer. It's very unique, actually. It's no other. I think our competitors don't provide it or don't provide it as well. And this was clearly a capability we needed. Clearly made the consumer experience a lot better. And today we are leveraging them to do a lot more than just installation. They are also doing visits to customers for, say, checking their mobile phones when the customer says that something is wrong. And many of the time we see a new customer will get a smartphone for the first time and it hits up. That's what smartphones do. So we figured out if we send someone to check that, it's better than the customer returning it and getting one more which also hits up. So things like that. Again, this is a capability that we didn't have. We are very happy to partner first and then invest and then kind of acquire and grow that company in-house.
So clearly it can't be all honky-dory, right? I mean, it seems like there are a lot of challenges, but maybe Ankur, you can kick off a little bit of, and I'll open up to the audience as well. How hard has it been to actually go through this journey? Typically, does it take longer than you anticipate? Does it take a lot of flexibility like this panel is talking about? What are the barriers along the way? And maybe I'll open it up to some questions after this.
Sure. Sorry, I don't think it is. So starting up is hard. There is a lot of uncertainty. Everyone sort of goes through what is called existential crisis. What you're doing is right, not right. And even if like you go and seek others' opinion, they will also probably just give you a vague answer. Because nobody can sort of predict the future for sure. So it is sort of your firm. So you need to have faith and a lot of faith in yourself and in your idea. That's one thing. Apart from that, then there is a lot of these initially. I mean, so once you are over that barrier that yes, I can do this, then the question is, okay, now I have to sort of build out a team and all those things. Not immediately start thinking about funding. That is what I would say. But first, sort of focus on your product, get some idea going, like have something tangible, and then probably then you will be able to tell how many people you need. But
have you used them for validation? While you may have faith and you may be very clear what you're trying to do, right? But once you get in front of the corporates or your clients.
Oh, absolutely. Like so, my co-founder Arun, he was actually working at Zivame. While Zivame is not, I mean, it's still, I would consider as a semi-startup. Yeah. But he had worked there and he had faced those exact problems. So we were very fortunate. From day one, Zivame became our customer. Of course, initially the product was free for them, but we got immense feedback and that helped shape our product. So that partnership was super, super useful.
I'll just add one more thing in terms of some of the startups who might be sitting here, one piece of advice, which is that I think the focus needs to be more in terms of solving a business problem, right? And we still see a lot of startups who are quite enamored by the technology and platform which they have built. But ultimately, the platform or technology is of no use unless it is solving a real-life business issue. And I think that needs to be fleshed out and explained clearly in terms of the value proposition which the startup is bringing to the table. So while technology is great, ultimately technology has to solve a business problem.
The same applies to investors, by the way. I think simplifying your messaging on what you're solving.
No, I'll sort of add that, and I'll also expand on what Navneet was saying. I think when you want to understand that corporation, look at what their priorities are. So if you're sitting in India and you're talking to an MNC, know that the MNC in India would be more sales driven. Their product decisions would be elsewhere, right? So if you're going with a core technology and trying to pitch it to the local team here, it'll be harder. On the other hand, you know that particular MNC, and I can talk about Cisco, smart cities is a big area for us, and we are getting good success. The government is pushing the concept. Smart cities, one part of that is the infrastructure. The other, the value of a smart city is the applications that will run on top of that. So if you are a startup and you're thinking on those lines, and let's say you have a parking solution, right? Or you have a waste management solution. Now, that's where you've got something that you've got an application and a solution, and you've got something that complements what a large company is doing, and something that is tactical, because here the sales engine sees huge opportunities there. And when we are going in front of a customer, the customer says, just selling me infrastructure doesn't help. Can you provide the full solution? So the point I'm making is that the more you sort of understand what the startup is looking for, and the flip side of that is, you could come and say, oh, I know Cisco is interested in IoT, and I've got some IoT solution. Now I want to go and partner. And you spend months and months and nothing happens, because it so happens that you probably have a consumer IoT solution.
Yeah.
Now, so again, the point I'm making is that make sure that what you're building, what you're working on, you choose the right startups, the right corporates to go to. And it's a basic strategy. You don't have to do a lot of analysis around that.
Yeah.
But it's basically understanding where do you think that particular large company will see business value. I think that's
not everyone is a fit for you in that case.
Right.
So I want to be a little controversial here in the sense that there are really two types of startups, right?
Yeah.
There are startups that are actually driven by a vision to do some innovation and to actually take some innovation through to realizing that vision. And for them to be flexible and work with corporates, you know, depending on what the corporate wants, is not really a good strategy.
Right.
You have to stick to the vision. You have to, you know, keep working at it. I mean, you can't come up with a new therapy for muscular dystrophy by you know, by checking what Apollo wants tomorrow, right?
Right.
So I do think you need to think about what kind of startup you are, right?
Yeah.
And if there is some big vision that's driving you, stick to that, right? Don't get distracted by what every corporate wants.
So maybe
It goes back to what business problem you're trying to solve, right?
So in the interest of time, I'll leave the specific interest areas of focus for offline networking. Maybe we'll open it up to 2 or 3 questions so that we can make it more relevant to what's top of mind for you. Can we get a few mics?
So this is Gaurav. I realized that most of the corporates have their maximum sales coming from B2B, right? And all the small startups, especially in the area of IoT, even in AI, mostly have the end consumer in mind. I mean, maybe they can take a leap of logic and think about B2B cases, but that doesn't occur to them now, because most of their ideas are generated from their self-experience or within their family. And that's their passion. I want to solve it for these guys, which I know. I know this problem.
So what's your question? Sorry?
So yeah, so either the corporate should help them realize the B2B cases, or otherwise it's not possible for startups to realize how they can work with a corporate very well.
So I think my perspective is the ecosystem is also maturing, right? There are a lot of more seasoned entrepreneurs coming in who have an insight into a particular industry or a particular domain. It's not necessarily that everything is consumer facing, but I'll let Surojit maybe talk about at least the consumer side of the equation.
Sure. See, we are a consumer internet business right? Pure e-commerce. But a lot of problems we have, you can call them as B2B problems, right? The example I gave you of Jeeves. I'll give you another example. For example, every company has this problem probably. curating catalogs. See, we have millions, 100 million or something, 70 million, 80 million FSNs, products, right? How do you make sure each product description matches with the image, the catalog is correct? There is very large number of sellers who are uploading this catalog and images. If you try to do this all manually, it just doesn't work. So of course, we develop a lot of technologies internally. We also work with ecosystem of startups to perfect it, right? I was talking about crowdsourcing. Again, even Google uses a lot of crowdsourcing and startups in that area. For example, reviews and ratings. Every product we sell need to have good number of reviews and ratings. Now, how do you make sure those reviews and ratings are actually useful? And people don't write abusive words. Actually, there are either people with evil intent or a lot of time in their hand. Lot of things happen, right? YouTube had a lot of issue with YouTube comments, like being really bad and so forth, and they had to curate it. Google had faced this kind of issues all the time. So we take help wherever we can. Again, I think as startups, you should think of where you can save some time for the corporate. In the sense, given enough time, everybody can pretty much build everything in software. I don't know about life sciences. That's a little different. But in software, I think time is essentially what you have, right? And if you can, as a startup, come up with the solutions and go to a corporate saying, see, I see you have this problem on your site. You can actually, as a consumer, see the problems yourself also, right? It gets manifested to the end consumer. So I have solved that problem for you. It's ready, available. You can plug it in within next 2 weeks. Or you can try to solve the problem in next 6 months, right? What do you want? And particularly if you target corporates and target particular areas which where there is particular competition. Say Cisco is competing with another company in particular area, and there you have a solution. They will look at it seriously. Same with us, right? We'll look at it very seriously wherever we can differentiate and accelerate. That's all every company is trying to do.
So I think I like what he was trying to say, and like what I would like to propose is that maybe some of the corporates should go to colleges more often, and just not from the recruitment point of view, but just list out the problems. That will get the students more excited about these things rather than just studying and passing their courses.
Sure.
And maybe they will do their own startups if they know these problems. They definitely don't have the exposure to all those business problems.
Yep. You want to just pass on a mic?
Can we have a mic there, please?
Anjan.
Hi. So you were talking about giving. My name is Avital. You were talking about giving solutions for smart cities development. So there were two things that I was worried about in this. First of all, we have to interact with government officials, which I don't think will help startups. Will welcome. I don't think they will welcome startups to propose solutions for the new projects that they are coming through. And the second thing is again similar to what he was saying, that we don't know how things will be in the new cities that are coming up. We know what problems are faced by people in the current setting. So we empathize with that more, and the startups will most probably be thinking of solutions in that domain. So I wanted to get some advice about getting startups in the smart cities.
Let's keep the questions a bit brief so that a few more people get a chance.
So I'll try and answer that in brief. I think, and I'll pick from what Dr. Chandru said. See, first as a startup, you decide what your focus area, business problem, what's your vision, right? Once you decide that smart cities is a business area you want to focus on, actually a corporate partnership is then helpful. Because all the things that you said, dealing with the government officials, etc., that's market access. And large companies are good at that, because any large company is presenting a full solution. So that's obviously a win-win. For a corporate also, because the solutions that you're building in that space, the large corporation may not be doing that, may not have the resources, may not have the time, and so on and so forth. So overall, I would say that you know, and this sort of came out in the panel also, you can't work backwards from what a corporate wants, because each corporate would want something else and the priorities will change. You decide as an entrepreneur where the opportunity is. And after that you decide, I mean, these are sort of basics of strategy. After that you decide whether you want to partner with a corporate or not. The whole point is there is value. And then you work on the overall problem. So I wouldn't say that you start working on what a corporate wants, and if, you know, if Cisco wants to be in smart cities, you should build something there. Yeah. If smart cities has opportunities, you focus on that.
So do we have time for another question or two? Or?
If we promise to keep it to a few seconds, we can take one more. No, I'd not give preference to volunteers this time.
My question towards partnership with corporates, so is it partnership or more of a outsourcing? It's more towards from the Accenture side. So when it comes to service industry, the business problems are outsourced to Accenture. And when you talk about the partnership, so it is more on a, you know, on a innovation side, or it is more of a subcontracting or sub-outsourcing?
Yeah, good question.
I think you can't have a more strategic partnership than what I am talking about here. Just the fact that we are taking and working with these startups with some of our biggest clients, where we are running multi-million-dollar deals every year. I don't think that we are talking about outsourcing, or we are talking about a vendor-supplier kind of a relationship. This is a relationship of equals, and Accenture understands that very well, right? So, you know, just to give you the context, there are hardly any solutions or technologies which Accenture itself cannot implement for our client. The fact that we are choosing not to do it is because we are trying to see how we can bring in the best innovation from the startups to our clients via Accenture. So it is all centered around innovation and leading edge disruptive technologies. In terms of implementing solutions, Accenture can do it on its own as well.
Great. So just to wrap up, maybe a quick piece of advice or a takeaway, if some of you want to.
Yeah, just want to leave all of you with the thought that I think there's never been a better time in India to be a startup or to drive innovation. Corporate partnerships or otherwise, I think there's a tremendous opportunity out there. In many ways, the corporate landscape here is actually is perhaps richer than even in the US, because you have a flavor of Indian corporates as well as multinationals, and there's a large presence of multinationals, which gives you exposure directly to the North American or European markets, which is perhaps not true in the US, where, you know, there is easy exposure to Asian markets. So grab those opportunities, but most importantly, focus on the product, focus on the business problem that you're trying to solve. If you get that right, I think everything else will follow.
The only thing I'll reiterate is, you know, as a startup, be patient with a corporation. It's a large system. And don't be shy of going top down. You know, if things are slow, and as a startup, you're supposed to take risks, go top down. That works wonders in a large company.
I'm going to actually tell startups to think about a particular sector. I do believe that healthcare in India is really going to have a whole bunch of singularities in the next, 5 to 10 years. And this is a great time to think about what you can do, what you can get into healthcare and do, use technologies, AI, whatever it is, right? And look at healthcare, because I think our country is desperately going to need some fantastic innovations in healthcare in the next few years.
I think a lot has been said already. I'll just say, focus on innovation, focus on the problem that kind of generates passion within you before going to corporate and asking what problem they have, right? Yeah. After that, of course, reach out and feel free to reach out to anybody, and starting from the top is always better. So hopefully if you are a startup with some traction, you have some, say VC money or angel money put into it, you'll have some contacts, use them, leverage them. Actually, that's their bigger value than the money. So make those contacts, reach out, and make your pitch. Be very open, be flexible. And of course, if the corporate wants you to do something you don't want to do, you don't need to, right? It can be open discussion. I would just say, I have a conversation with at least 1 or 2 startups every week almost. Right? I'm always looking at what's happening out there, where can we kind of use the technology, leverage, and even if we cannot use it, I would kind of go on my own and maybe help the startup. Right? If I have a common passion in that area. So you will make a lot of contacts through that as well, just through that process, and that cannot hurt. No.
I'll just leave you with a little bit of interesting statistics. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, 2 years back, there was not even 1 startup which was there on my profile. Now startups outnumber the corporate connects which I have, right? So you can well imagine that, the kind of trust and the kind of commitment which we are bringing to this is very, very strong. So this is not just talking. We are putting our money where our mouth is. And secondly, I would advise the startups, be bold. The corporates need you much more than you need them, right? But have that belief in you.
So our Wi-Fi password is get shit done. So stop thinking too much and just get shit done.
Great. And just on that note, maybe you can start with just networking with this panel. But thanks so much for all the panel members for their perspectives. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, gentlemen. Really insightful panel discussion. Thank you, all of you.
Next time.